Okay, everybody, welcome to another episode of the ProfNoctis Weekly Show. This is part 2 of our interview with SchrodingersBabySeal, aka Clarke. In case you missed part 1, Wade's going to get you caught up. We encourage you to go check out the episode, but if you're starting here, that's totally okay because we're going to open this episode with a recap of some of his fan theories. Go ahead and catch us up on what we talked about last episode, Wade.
Thanks, Evan. Last time we talked about how Clarke got into content creation, how playing Final Fantasy VII as a teenager changed his life, and then we got into some of his true crime opinions on Final Fantasy VII. So get excited because the unknown journey continues as we go even deeper.
Let's do it. I'm just going to overview some main points, make sure that we've got it correct so that we can kind of restate it for the viewers, because that was, first of all, that was beautiful.
Yeah, that was a beautiful summation. This is not your first
Are you
time.
reading off a teleprompter for that?
Yeah, seriously.
Or what
that was...
exactly, like, what is this just Mind Palace or what are we doing here?
Not Clarke's first rodeo on this one.
Okay, yeah. I'll go point by point, and you can, and I'm going to grossly oversimplify kind of what you said, and you can just say yes or modify it to be more accurate, okay? And I'll go quick because you got on 2 post-it notes. So, all right, you ready, Clarke?
Yes.
Okay. You're saying there's a possibility that Aerith has put some sort of, my words, not yours, psychological block on Cloud in some way to protect him?
Yes.
Great.
Fair enough. Yeah.
You're saying that there's a possibility that she has some kind of, I think you said, prescient communication, where she is communicating with him actively in some capacity, regardless of if she's alive or not.
Yes.
Okay. You're saying that she potentially planned some of this and made Tifa aware of it?
Yes.
You're saying that the worlds within the live stream are potentially interconnected worlds by their threads based on their relationships with Tifa, such as the orphanage and Biggs and a few other characters?
Aerith in this case, but yeah.
Oh, sorry. Maybe I misspoke. Yeah, Aerith. Sorry, yeah. Connections with Aerith. Yeah. No, see, it says Aerith and not Tifa. Nice. And then you're saying it could be a mental state and world defined by Yogacara kind of hopes and dreams. We're not sure how Cloud is going to make these things real, but it has some connection back to like hopes and dreams and their manifestation into reality.
Yeah, I think the devs left themselves enough room to do that if they needed to.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the last thing you're saying, the primary purpose of showing multiple versions of Aerith's fate is to have a thread that can pull a lot of potential things together and keep things open-ended.
Yeah.
Okay. That's it. I think there's a summation for the viewers and the listeners.
And that was helpful because that was a lot to really kind of comprehend and stuff. So thank you for outlining that for us, Evan. With this idea of multiple worlds, then, do you consider these splits in the live stream flow, or are these specific deviating hopes and dreams of Aerith or certain characters? How do you explain the multiple worlds kind of happening? All of the different rifts in the dogs, so to speak.
Yeah. So the different dogs, I will say that they do seem to, each dog seems to kind of correlate to a person that's kind of the main character of that sequence. If you watch it on its own. However,
could you spell that out for us? Because I've actually never heard that.
And will you kind of catch everybody up, maybe who hasn't played the game, what dogs you're talking about?
Yeah, so there's a dog called Stamp, and Stamp is a Shinra mascot, and not at all existent in the OG. It was a mascot created for specifically the Re-Trilogy project. And in Final Fantasy VII Remake, the dog was like omnipresent throughout the game. This is Stamp, loyal Stamp. Cloud is called like you're just like Stamp, a loyal little dog.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's all these references to Stamp. Then it becomes graffiti, and it's like this. It's very clearly like Shinra propaganda to get people to join. But they really they throw it in your face. They name one of the chapters off of it. Mm-hmm. They put it in the game like 180 times. You know, actually, I actually counted. There's like 400 stamps, but they put it everywhere. Put the imagery, and it's all a beagle. And in the very end, when we see Zack have a different fate this time in Remake, in the original, he dies during his last stand. In Remake, we see a variation of events, and the chip bag with Stamp on it flies by, and just this one time, it's a terrier. It's a different dog breed.
But it's clearly still Stamp.
It's clearly still Stamp. It's got the hat. It's on a chip bag called Stamp's Champs.
Yes, just in case.
The word original is on it. And the developers, when asked about Zack's fate, were like, "Did you notice Stamp is different?" And so they really made it clear, like, this is kind of going to be a thing. In Rebirth, Stamp maintains his beagleness through most of the game. There are some terriers thrown throughout that were patched out, but I don't want to talk about that. But for the most part, if you are playing as Cloud and you're doing your party stuff and you're doing most of the quest, you're going to see Stamp, and it's going to be the lovable beagle that you're familiar with. However, in the interlude world, there are several interlude sections, including the very beginning of the game where you are playing as Zack, who has a different fate that he did in the OG.
Well, he's alive, so
he's
playable.
He's playable, yeah. Which is a different fate, yeah. And it's different. It's different in a significant way because we see Cloud. We see Zack actually aware of his demise at the end of Crisis Core, and Gilles comes down. There's this whole feeling and this Zack, the Zack that we're seeing in the Re-Trilogy, is really confused about his fate. He didn't see Angeal. He's instead he doesn't understand how he survived, but he also believes that he's carrying Cloud with him. So it's not like there are not clear indicators that he's in some kind of purgatory or afterlife. He's got things that are making it not seem, and there's real consequences in the place that he's at. People can still die there. But so this is a concrete world with the same mechanics, so to speak, as the top level world. So it is not just him going into the afterlife. It doesn't seem like the world system works that way. As the game progresses, as you get further and further into the narrative, you get little snippets of Zack's experiences in this interlude world. All throughout, terrier. Until the last chapter. And in the last chapter, Zack starts to make some decisions. And there's also interlapping events with the top world where Cloud is pushed into the interlude world somehow. As the makeup of that world changes, there starts to be some variety in the dog breeds we see. It's not just a terrier anymore, and it's certainly not a beagle. So for the date with Cloud and Aerith in the interlude, there's a scene where Aerith says, "Hey, you're in my dream." She says that you're in my dream, and they're walking around, and it's now like a chihuahua. It doesn't look like a chihuahua, but that's what the devs say it is. So I guess it's a chihuahua. It's a long-haired chihuahua.
Yeah.
So there's a chihuahua timeline when they show a scene of Zack following Biggs to try and find Biggs. Biggs is holding a stamp bag that's a pug. We see later on Zack outside of the church before the doors open up and Sephiroth comes out and says, "No, not you." And Johnny is running by with a little hairless dog, and it's supposed to be a Spitz or something. And so there's these different dog breeds, and they all do seem to have a connection to a specific character. The pug with Biggs, the Chihuahua with Cloud and Aerith, and the terrier with Zack. But they all seem to kind of manifest based on the decisions Zack is making. And there is some inconsistency with the way that the scene is edited to make that totally viable for me, but it is in fact what the Ultimania says. So okay. I'm just going to go with that.
The Ultimania, can you describe the Ultimania for us briefly?
Yeah, so the Ultimania is a official book by Square Enix that has dev interviews and is written by Studio Bent stuff and is generally vetted by the devs. Now, I will say that this particular assessment about decisions is not necessarily written by a dev. It's written by Bent stuff, Bent stuff staff, and so we can assume that it's most likely true. But if it ended up being something more specific to the individual holding on later, I also wouldn't be like, oh, that's the most shocking thing ever. But what we can say is that the nature of these universes seems to be tied to either decisions or like the collective unconsciousness of an individual, that's within this world. And so it seems to be like worlds manifesting as a result of consciousness.
Which goes into some understandings of Yogacara, right? And so what do you know about Yogacara? How can you help us and our listeners understand? Because the devs have talked about this idea of Yogacara, collective unconscious, as maybe some lenses that could be useful for understanding what's going on here.
Right. So the principal writer of Final Fantasy VII and the re-trilogy is Nojima, Kazushige Nojima. And he stated in the Rebirth Ultimania dev interview that if you understand Jung's collective unconscious and Yogacara, you might be able to guess the plot of Final Fantasy VII re-trilogy. And so Yogacara is a branch of it's like ontology adjacent. It is a branch of conceptualization in actually kind of yoga schools of more than one Eastern religion. Right. And it's actually like such a wide practice that it can kind of describe a lot of things down to like dietary models. So it's to use it as a word is it's a little broad, but for the most part, when people are talking about it, they're really talking about a specific element that conceptualizes consciousness as having a relationship with reality that is more than perceptual, meaning that it is more than receptive, that consciousness has the ability and power to define reality in a tangible way, make changes to reality. It is a it's sort of a more concrete and Eastern centric version of positive psychology or The Secret, that kind of ideology. And so it's most likely, like, if you were to take all of Yogacara and then try and look for ways that particular school of yoga can be applied to the plot of Final Fantasy VII Retrilogy, you're probably not going to look at the cooking segments. You're probably not going to look at, the dietary ideas or the stretching elements. You're going to look at the giant, like, rift in the sky and the fact that Aerith said things like, "This is my dream." And then we're in a world that's like, in Midgar. Like, and that's another thing to note about the interlude sequence. The interlude sequence never branches outside of Aerith's home turf. We don't see Terrier Gongaga. We don't see, Hug Gold Saucer, So it really is, it does give a lot of indications that there's something about the nature of these worlds that is driven into existence by Aerith herself.
So what do you think that means for part 3? How does everything end up if through the lens of Yogacara and Aerith's dream?
That's a great question. And I don't have a good answer, because I'm fearful that what this could mean. It's really easy for me to, like, kind of doom out on this and assume that what this could mean is something like that a convenient, death-defying dream world where everybody gets their happy ending exists alongside the real world, and that does, I think, risk eliminating some of the stakes. And if you disconnect the stakes, some of the real world messaging loses its power and applicability. For me, in the way that I view stories, not everybody feels that way, and there's a case to be made that, like, some messages sort of really transcend, those kind of stakes. I think, Everything Everywhere All at Once is a great example of this, where they're, really focused on messaging that kind of transcended, the stakes of a multiverse, so to speak. And it's also the real quick, I'll finish this. The other thing I'm worried about is that what this could be pointing to is some kind of multiple ending thing. Okay. And, I think it's unlikely that they can get away with that if they do any kind of focus testing. Part of me wants them to do it because I love the risk idea of it, but I'll also tell you this, and this is a little colloquial. Okay. I was at a preview event with Katase and Hamaguchi before the game came out, and Katase was talking to an interviewer, and he was talking about how Final Fantasy VII, the OG, pushed the medium in many ways to be on par, or at least in the same realm as cinema. And he believes that, and it is his great hope for Final Fantasy VII Part 3, Rebirth, the Part 3 of the Retrilogy, that we can push that even beyond cinema. And I was, like, racking my brain, like, how do you get beyond cinema more than you already have? You're giving us, we get to fight. And that just made me stick to that idea that maybe, like, kind of the holy grail of storytelling in video games, like, a lot of people really try to do this well narratively, and I don't think anybody's like super nailed it yet, is multiple endings. Like nobody's nailed it. Like Mass Effect 3 didn't nail it. Like, and Mass Effect is like the holy grail of choose your own adventure storytelling. And so I'm fearful that maybe that's what he's going for. But like, what if he nails it? Like, hell yeah, like I'm all for it. But in more of a practical sense, how can Yogacara be reduced to something that can help with the messaging? And to me, what we would have to do is peel back the layers of it and say that, in a non-physical sense, in a non-corporeal sense, there are utilities to positive psychology, into believing in yourself, into making the world as you want it to be. It's just that it takes a lot more work, and that hopes and dreams can manifest through actions. Like we talked at the beginning of this chat about how, I was actualized into seeking out friendships and trying to build connections. Like you wouldn't think from, the guy that throws parties that brings all the creators together that I was ever an isolationist. And the turning point was this game, and so that's a way that, positive psychology, Yogacara, and, quote unquote, The Secret can actualize in a secular and real way. And I think that messaging can still work really well in part 3. It does feel like a dubious and narrow path, though.
It does. You just said something wildly beautiful and profound. The idea that you, an isolationist, have become this kind of person who brings people together, and you saw the value of it, and that became an identity shift, kind of mid path because of this game. And I don't want to miss that, just because that is the power that transcends cinema. Like there is an agency involved, and there's something just amazing there. So I didn't want to miss that for a second. Thank you for saying that. That's potent, right, Evan?
It's what you said the main point of the game is. Yeah. This idea that and so the fact that that's the story that the game is telling, and that you could find yourself in it, and that through storytelling and you being able to interact with it, it empowered you for something to actually change in your life, is full circle. I have a follow-up question, but it's silly, so.
I have a question somewhat. We'll get back to your silly question. Is it related to this?
I wrote it down.
Okay, we'll get back to it.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is that time in the episode for our minigame stretch break. So I'm going to get another stretch and pretend like we didn't film these 2 minigame stretch breaks back to back. And then we're going to kick off with that theme music. We have Clarke joining us. 3, 2, 1.
What are you doing?
I just,
okay.
You just feel it like a ribbit frog.
All right. Okay. Because I'm experienced at this, I did a pro move there, and I muted my. I muted my headset so that you couldn't throw me off with your intentional disrespect of the melody.
Now, here's the lore that you don't know about Evan. Evan spends almost every online waking moment in Final Fantasy XIV in the gold saucer. He knows this song. He's just that bad at it.
I don't, because I have the music turned off in the game.
What? You skip cutscenes and you turn the music off? Anathema. That is.
Dude just likes to play, okay?
He does. I like to listen King of Vermilion or whatever.
I like to listen to my own music.
Oh man, I've done that.
Do you play 14, Clarke?
I've played some 14. And I always keep very up to date with the lore, like super up to date. Because the lore is really good.
Oh,
like amazing. I really like it's so good. Yeah, and I mean, I hate to say it, but sometimes that's the best way to, for Dawn Trail, honestly, watching it has probably made the experience
Fair.
much
No
better
spoilers
for-
for Dawn Trail. I am
much
still
better for
early,
me.
but-
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's all I'll
Yeah.
say. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the Endwalker stuff is like right down your alley. Greek
Endwalker.
philosophy, the intellecty stuff. I loved that stuff. So
Yeah, although I'll be honest, just from like what does Clarke resonate with narratively? Hard to beat Shadowbringers.
yeah,
Man.
it is
Shadowbringers
hard
so
to beat
good.
Shadowbringers. Yeah,
Like
yeah.
in terms, like in anything, like just in media, period. Like it's Shadowbringers is transcendent.
Yeah. So you and I have never really talked about that. Ryan, Night Sky Prince, and I argue a little bit about that because I'm more of an Endwalker guy. That's the one that hit me. Though I love Shadowbringers. Don't get me wrong. Like,
yeah. Endwalker does some things better than anything else in 14. By like a lot.
Yeah.
And there are moments, but in terms of like the cruxes of both, like the emotional climax, it's Shadowbringers.
It's hard to beat
such
Shadowbringers.
Yeah,
You're right.
But there's so much.
So this is the part in our episode where we do a mini game stretch break and we get to know each other a little bit.
We can always talk Final Fantasy.
And so it's been nice to get to know all the different things that you guys love or are drawn to in Final Fantasy 14. Thank you for sharing.
That's great.
You're welcome.
Wade, what card deck are we using here? As I get
Today we are going to be using our Geek Therapy card deck from Geek Therapeutics. They offer some prompt for us to have deeper discussion. So here we go.
Okay, great. All right, so we got a bingo wheel of vulnerability. We have numbers 1 through 50. Clarke, as our guest, you get to pick the first number.
Okay, we're gonna go with 19.
19. Wade, 1 through 50.
42.
Wade says 42. I'm going to go with 26. All right. Listener, don't forget to pick your number. Here's the sound of the bingo wheel of vulnerability. Clarke, let me know when to stop.
Stop.
All right. See if it grabs one. All right. It grabbed one. It is red. And that number is, oh my gosh, 27. I was one off.
Whoa, close.
Oh, man.
Wow.
All right, so rip off card number 27 there, Wade, and let's get to it.
Okay, here we go. This one is rooted in anime. Clarke, are you an anime guy?
Yeah,
You are. Okay.
I got you.
Awesome. We're really depending on you. And I guess, Evan, you're an anime guy too. Okay. Here it is. I want you to imagine an anime world where you can achieve any goal. What goal do you need to achieve the most at this moment? Talk about what's preventing you from achieving it. How would this particular anime world allow you to complete that goal? So we're thinking not in terms of you are just in this world, but you're in an anime world.
Mm-hmm.
Put a real world challenge you have in that anime, and how would you solve it in that anime world? Does that make sense? Okay. So, give you a moment to think. I'm going to have to think hard about the animes that I have seen.
You're making an anime world. Make your own anime world.
Make my own anime world?
Yeah.
Well, I think it means, well, the way I took it, my perspective was that you're imagining an already pre-made anime world. But you can do either one.
I'm making my own. I'm going to make my own. I'm going to make my own right now.
Okay, Yoga-Kara over here.
I'm going to make
Let's go.
I'm manifesting my own anime world. And in that world, this world that I am in, it is a world of dogs. It is a dog-specific anime based and inspired by our conversations from this episode. And I am a dog. I'm a dog. Everybody else is a dog. There's only dogs in this world. There's Millie, my dog, behind me. And in this world, we are needing to go grocery shopping. And that is the goal that I have, is to eat healthier. And as a dog, I have to figure out how to get into the grocery store. And we are going to steal some food from the grocery store as dogs. And so it is now Dogs Ocean's 11. It's a heist anime. And me and my other quadruped canines are in our way to steal healthy ingredients to solve the problem of our poor nutrition. So that is the anime that I have created for myself. Popcorn, either one of you.
Wow. Thank you, Evan. I would watch Dog Ocean's 11. That's good.
Yes.
What about you, Clarke?
Oh, I'm going now? Okay.
I guess. In
All
my
right.
anime world, you go next.
Wait, the anime world is an interview world.
I am I am using the power of Yogacara to manifest me not going right now. Okay. All right. Welcome to a journey. All right. So my goal, okay, I have to, by the end of today, this is a real world goal. I have to clean my house and like pretty well. And I also have to balance cooking 1 pound of Alaskan king crab for my wife, because it's like she's had a very long week at work, and this is like her last day of work until she gets her weekend, and I want her to come home to her favorite meal and a clean house. And so in the anime world of Dragon Ball, how I would solve this problem is I would go on a tangential journey in a spaceship with 100G gravity and train really, really hard so that I am strong enough to scrape every last bit of dirt off of the blinds that were supposedly dirt resistant, but that was a lie by Temu marketing. And so I'm going to charge my key aggressively while staring in a mirror and screaming at the top of my lungs for at least 30 minutes, and then scrub the bejesus out of that while some crab boils.
I love it. I see it perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that. So Dragon Ball is like one of 2 animes that I've seen. I haven't seen all of it, obviously, because there's like a billion episodes. But I have got to completely devise 2 syllabi pretty soon to finalize those and just get all the things ready. I also have to finish up some work on my lecture series that's coming up for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And I've got a series of meetings. So I have only seen 2 anime. One is Dragon Ball. The other one is Love is War, which is my absolute favorite anime of all time.
It's really good anime.
I love it. And the way that
what a dichotomy.
It is the 2
I've read
faces
Goodnight
of
Moon
like,
and all of Tolstoy.
pretty close. That's me. So the way that they solve dilemmas is that I've found that in a split second, they severely overthink everything. All right. But it takes place in the split second, but it's like half the episode. Okay. So like they'll be like, oh, so this back here went into this, and this conversation, did they mean this or did they mean this? They go down all of these different things. So in this anime world, I'm looking at syllabus, relationships with colleagues, working with some partners at the stream, and all this kind of stuff, and thinking to myself, in a split second, how can I incorporate all that I know into a momentary decision so that I can knock this out really, really fast in the scope of about 25 minutes to make it a single episode, which would be incredible. That
Even
would be
left room for commercials.
Even enough room for commercials. Yeah.
Hint,
gotta roll
hint,
the ads.
sponsors, hint, hint.
So that's how we do it today. How would you address your real world problems using an anime world?
Manifest. Back to the episode.
Let's go. But I have a question here. This idea, it would be a bold, I'm going to say bold, move to make this game end in multiple endings where people's hopes and dreams are all realized. It almost goes into some theologies that heaven or nirvana or afterlife is specifically catered to the one living it and stuff. There's some theologies that go into that. Yeah. This game, however, does also play with the idea that there are multiple dreams, multiple hopes, but oftentimes conflicting hopes and dreams, depending on who you're talking to. In fact, it's the whole idea of resistance against Shinra, resisting Sephiroth's dream for the planet, for himself, for his world, and subsuming everyone into that. And so I wonder, how would you deal with that mindset of, everyone's hopes and dreams kind of coming to fruition, but also identifying that some hopes and dreams may not be for the collective good. And what do you do? What do you do when there's a conflict in the game? And how do you see that theme sort of played out a little bit?
So, I mean, conflict is the conflict between people's wants and needs is definitely kind of core to the experience of Final Fantasy VII, and I think the re-trilogy does this really well by building the geopolitics of the world so organically. It looks the world feels and acts much more like a real mirror of our own society, and as a result you see these factions with these different set of values and hopes and dreams coming into conflict. And from a top down point of view, a lot of that is displayed as nature taking its course, right? We see a lot of we have Bugenhagen talking sometimes about well, that's just the way it's supposed to be. That's what happens. That adds to the cycle of life and death. Is that the conflict can result in death, which returns your energy to the planet, and that then grows more life, and so it's the cycle. And so the conflict is a necessary element of the world system, and a lot of times the difference between one person's hope and another person's hope results in one of them surviving and the other dying, and so that natural cycle stuff is really, I think, how they address the conflict between competing hopes. And but it does, I think, address it does at least allow the player or the viewer to make assessments on which set of hopes and dreams has the most utility in serving the most people, and like it does do so, I think, by creating foils between, say, the way that Hojo and the darker sectors of Shinra want to deal with these reunion clones, and then the way that the people in Nibelheim that just want to feed them, and Cloud and Co being kind of defensive of the reunion clone that gets shot in in the Shinra 8 by Captain Titov, like saying, hey, why do you do that? Like it gives us these snapshots of different ways to be in a conflict, the different hopes that you can have, and what hopes should you adopt, what dreams should you have if your values are for the betterment of the collective. And I think it gives you, like all stories do that. I mean, it's really it's not Final Fantasy reinventing, morality play, but it does do it well.
There's been so much discussion about, and even on your show with Phil Hartshorn, the idea of redeeming at least some part of Sephiroth's story, the desire to save everyone, which I think is a really compelling idea, even though it's not necessarily saving or redeeming him. It's an interesting way to see his transformation.
Yeah.
And so to think sympathetically about some of these more villainous intentions, not necessarily sympathetically, but maybe in a more grounded sense,
Sure.
to understand a more fleshed out version. What do you think this game's message is about the dreams that one should align with or not? Like, how do you what is a moral scope according to Final Fantasy VII? You know, it arranged so much of our childhoods, figuring out what we stand for, what we are against, all that kind of stuff. What would you say is the moral imperative, if there is one, or at least the questions one should ask when they're thinking about who am I and what do I stand for?
Mm, oof, that's heavy,
It
and
is.
I love it. I love. I do think that Final Fantasy VII makes surprisingly few directly moral statements, but it does present a story that makes it seem obvious to side with others, with others' autonomy, and allowing people to make and embrace their own mistakes. So it does really, I think, make a moral argument against, oligarchy, against totalitarianism, about it says that, your dream is to make your own decisions. Zach seems to be sort of pushing into the dreams and honor bit, like, seems to be about, I'm tired of being told what to do. I'm tired of not having agency. I want to live my way. And I think what morality is being pushed there is about the collective well-being within the construct of individualism. And I've always said that this game is that this story is a really interesting juxtaposition of collectivist ideology and individualist societies, because it talks a lot about individual agency and choice, but it also makes strong points for collectivist, other-centered ideas and morality. So you look at Sephiroth, and Sephiroth, is a caricature of somebody that supposedly has everybody's well-being in mind by saying they know what's best for them, right? So that robs them of agency, which isn't what's best for them. It's also arrogant and absurd. But you see reflections of that in the real world. Like, it's not from nowhere. Like, you see a lot of that in the real world. And so it is commentary on that, and it does give you a look at what that looks like. Whereas you look at, Zach is a good character for this, because you look at, particularly in Rebirth, because we're talking about this game, we're talking about Rebirth. Zach is somebody that joined Soldier because, he's just a dumb kid, didn't know what else to do. But it's always clear he's always wanted to do the right thing. He's always wanted to be a good person. And, so he's as much a victim of the situation as everybody else. And where he gets his kind of moment here is in the interlude sequence, where he's kind of tired of dying, tired of the same thing happening over and over again. And he resists that. So there's this idea of resisting, the system that's keeping you without agency. And if anything is out there saying, hey, you're not allowed to be other-centered, you're not allowed to help your others, you need to be in this box, then that's probably inherently considered a bad system, according to the morality shown by Final Fantasy VII and related media.
Oh, good.
I think that we talked earlier about the stakes and how the game sets up the stakes. What does it mean if the conflict is resolved one way or the other? And the stakes provide weight within this story. it seems to me, in my experience, that the tipping point of irreparable harm is part of what adds to the stakes of the character conflict. This idea that your expression of your individual liberty is going to result in destruction that will never get something back, almost like a silent spring. If we go too far, we won't do this. So the only option that I have is to destroy your endeavors before they can destroy everything. And some characters believe that we're headed towards irreparable harm and others don't, but that seems to be the container in which that moral struggle is placed. How do you think that is impacted by the storytelling and where they may go in the future?
Like I said, it's something I'm a little nervous about. But yeah, I think because so much of the world of Final Fantasy VII is meant to mirror our own, a lot of the messaging relies on stakes that could happen in our own world. For those of you that aren't familiar with the Final Fantasy VII lore, the original concept for Final Fantasy VII was that it took place in New York City, and that you can still see like references to that. There's a stereotypical connection between New York and pizza, and so that's why Midgar is shaped like a pizza. And Under the Rotting Pizza is sort of a in-game message. These are all references to New York City. There's also obvious American references. Like having a orange blonde, guy that owns a lot of businesses and puts his name on stuff and maybe overstepping his reach. There's references like that. I'm not saying that by the time that the re-trilogy came out that for sure that was the messaging that they were saying, but it is sort of like a caricature of like an American rich guy.
Well, they could have changed it too, though. I mean, I think the subway cars were a big thing for me. Like those are very it's a very American subway experience. Those are very American subway cars. And as a kid, that's what I related to, because I was like, oh, so in the new ones, they could have shifted it back to be something that was more Japanese, and they reinforced that kind of sentiment in like the way that those first conversations happen and the way that it introduces you to the story. They happen in like a New York style subway scene, not a Japanese style.
Absolutely. And the propaganda, some of that's taken straight from, like army propaganda, etc. So,
chapter 4,
right?
Four
small reptiles being raised by a rat, each named after famous artists.
Exactly. 100%. There's there's no doubt about it. I mean, if you go to Aerith's house and you look at the butterfly. I'm not joking. The butterfly is an American flag. Its wings are an American flag. I'm not joking.
Is it really? I'll be Googling. Hold on. You're good. I'll be back.
No, you'll have to look. You'll have to go and play the game, because I don't think Google's not going to catch that anymore.
Has anyone ever talked? I've literally never heard.
This is the first time I've heard of that.
Have you talked about that before?
Early in my career, it's actually lore building for me. If you wonder why
this is a ProfNoctis weekly show first.
So if you wonder why my logo is a butterfly,
I've wondered that. Yeah,
it is because Sleep Easy drew that butterfly because of our deep lore conversations about the USA butterfly. Oh. He mixed it with the cross slash too. To make it kind of, it was too deep of a cut before that. The other thing is I also live in a monarch grove, and I'm very attached to the forestation efforts with the monarchs, stuff like that. So other things. So I was like, okay, I can keep it. So it's not just a dumb, weird Schrodinger's level reference. It's also, I love butterflies. So, but yeah, so. To get back on track with your question though, my thoughts on the tipping point thing. I think that's a really good point with Aerith's fate in particular. Why Aerith's fate was a tipping point is because she is the last of his species. And if we're talking about games with environmental messaging, there's something more poignant about that messaging if you lose the last of a species. Now, that's getting a little muddy now because of new contributions to the lore. Like, for instance, and this is not in the games, this is in the Rebirth Ultimania. We find out that the reason Bugenhagen has lived so long is because he's got Cetra descent.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, that's like I'm not a big fan of that kind of lore being gated behind Ultimanias, but we are getting to the point where it's kind of like maybe they're pulling off of that messaging, or maybe it was unintentionally poignant. Like they didn't really think about it when they wrote it. Like this is very poignant that the last unicorn is dying. Last Unicorn is another like formative environmental like piece of media aimed at children from for people in my elderly generation, so like that was very poignant. So the idea of those tipping points being the stakes that we relate to and how they really help with the messaging, right? So we're being shown this world that's very similar to ours, and we're seeing stakes that are just a hop, skip, and a jump away from our own world and choices that people in power could make for us, and that the little choices that we make, it's really easy to feel like we've got nothing to contribute to that. And what this game does is it takes a person that wants to be extraordinary so much that he loses himself in the process. And when he finds himself and his ordinariness, and that empowers him to do the extraordinary, that messaging again relates to this story with real stakes that we can relate to. And so again, how this relates to like a practical version of Yogacara is that the stakes really make the payoff of our ordinary selves being able to make real change in the world have stakes too. We think, oh, there are real stakes in this world, but my actions too, even little old me, even little old Clarke, can do things that have an impact. It starts as a single ball of snow, but it becomes an avalanche.
No, I cannot.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
So good.
So sorry.
That was amazing.
I don't know if I answered your question well or not, but
you stuck the landing well enough.
okay.
No, that was perfect. Truly. We're clipping that, by the way. That was like an amazing assessment, and it's exactly what I would hope. Some of my students sometimes ask me, why would I play Final Fantasy VII? And I think I'm just going to show them that clip because it is such a reminder of this kind of individual growth mindset that leads into just the betterment of the community around you, the collective. Again, and I think that is potent and poignant. So thank you for that. That was amazing. Evan, do you have any closing questions for us? Anything you'd like to?
I'm terrified to ask a closing question because it's going to open more doors and create more threads of possibility
for days, right?
9 hours easy.
Yeah. I have one question that I think is important that I'm really curious about, and then I have one question that can close us out. I can ask them both if we want to take a few more minutes, but I'll let us decide together.
Why don't you just ask them separately?
Okay, I'm gonna ask a more open-ended question first, and then I'll ask the question that is just like I'm dying to know, that will probably help us wrap up. In such a mistake. This is gonna be long. In the nature of the discourse of the game and the conflict that is present within the characters, in my opinion, they tell such a compelling and challenging story with really big stakes and strong tension, because I think they want to model the ability for us to talk about difficult, challenging things that we're going to experience in the world and give us a chance to shape conversations, avert future crises that we may experience, and creating a fantasy world to do it, that we can experiment and have good conversations with one another about the story that can add value to ourselves and society. They have set us up for this opportunity, but I think the nature of discourse, especially online discourse, creates a lot of challenges for us to actually be able to get to the meat of honest personal conversation around some really important topics when it comes to individual morality, individual liberty, the environment, politics, power dynamics. In your experience, what opportunities do you think this game provides us to be able to have those discussions? And what do you think needs to shift in our attitudes as a community to be able to really have those discussions well and not just devolve into some of the existing camps and patterns that, to be honest with you, I don't think have improved since 1997. I think have in a lot of ways gotten more challenging.
They are so much worse than they were in 1997. Yeah, we're really online. This is a very, I mean, just in the last decade, I don't think that, I saw a post and I agree with this, that if Lost came out now, the discourse would be absolutely insufferable about it now. And it wasn't particularly sufferable then, but it would be even more insufferable now. And I don't have the power to fix any of that other than to engage in as much kind of conversation like this as possible. And I have experimented personally with giving that kind of conversation space on my channel on a few occasions. And every time I've done so, that video comes down. And because even if the conversation itself goes fine and it is well curated and all of the problematic elements get edited out, the discourse around it is unsalvageable, right? And so, it's easy to say like, well, just don't pay attention or don't give attention to it. That's really hard. If it were easy, we wouldn't be doing it. It would have extincted itself right now. It would have extinguished itself now. But so the fact that it hasn't means that it's kind of here to stay. I do think, though, that there is a difference between the way, for instance, just talking about Rebirth. I think the way that Rebirth is actually perceived and the way that it is portrayed as being perceived on certain social media outlets, for instance, is very different. If you go to your standard convention, or if you talk to journalists, and I'm not saying journalists have by nature better opinions than non-journalists, but they are in this, they have this degree of inoculation from discourse because of, a lot of the ethical constraints journalists have to have in order to work in the field.
And they have a responsibility for research and substantiation of the points, right?
Absolutely. So their responsibility to be journalists, and you mix that with I think the general consensus view of Rebirth in like at like a convention among real people that are not terminally online. They're not in situations where all that one has to do to be given a stage is present information, and the validity of that information is not the metric by which it is seen. You know, like the other elements factor into how much a point is seen, to the point where it gives this inflated sense of value to absolutely insane takes, you know. And there are you know, just to be clear, there are upsides to that, but it's very clear what the downsides are. And at the end of the day, if you were to compare the terminally online view of Rebirth to, I think, the real world view of Rebirth, most people don't think Rebirth is about which girl Cloud falls in love with. That is a absolutely tertiary point. It is important, you know, and I think it's valid to talk about and express. But if there is a lens that you can look at online discourse of Final Fantasy VII through and think it is an otome game. You think it is a dating sim, you know, and most people don't see it that way out in the world. I also think Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is the absolute unadulterated frontrunner for the Game of the Year at the Game Awards. And I say this as somebody that has relationships with the people that actually vote. Not the Twitter X, court of personalities. You know, none of that. Like the people that actually have a seat at the table. I think it will probably win Game of the Year, barring some insane right fielder. And you can, and I'm sure there will be discourse about it if it wins that it was a slow year and that's why it won. But for the most part, the reflective experience of this game is that there's a lot of really valuable things that can come from it. There's a lot of really valuable discourse that can happen from it. And I think the best way, you know, to prove that is to engage in as much of that as possible, you know.
How do we get back to some of the modeling that the characters do in the game, though, where there's conflict, there's disconnection, and there's repair that's modeled for us constantly in the dynamic of the characters? They apologize to each other. They ask good questions. They sit and they listen to each other. They disagree. They storm off, and they somehow find ways to come back together. And so for a community of people who have played the same game, allegedly, to not connect with those themes of forgiveness and patience and really listening and understanding is an interesting thing to experience for me.
Absolutely. But, you know, like one of the ways that Final Fantasy VII in particular has us in conflict with a large corporate entity that maybe has its hands in several different pots, like, you know, a space division, you know, and now a social media division. They make cars and deal in energy, you know, was to bomb a reactor. So I don't think maybe Final Fantasy VII has the answers necessarily on how to deal with X, you know, so to speak. But no, it's a great point, and it's true. Like, I wish we could just be the kind of charitable that let's say Barrett is to Cloud after Cloud pushes Tifa into the live stream. You know, he's firm, gives him a slap, but it's like you can tell there's all this love and heart behind it. You know, there's this really rich tapestry, and you know, one of the ways that like, for instance, we're talking to each other face to face. You know, we're not keyboard warrioring that. So it's really hard for us to engage in that level of disconnected commentary with each other. And, you know, so all my advice to somebody is, hey, how would you like to be more like, you know, your heroes in this game or the people you look up to in this game is, you know, if if you're about to write a comment to somebody, think of them as a person. Try and picture them. Try and say, like, hey, I'm standing face to face in front of this person, and how am I going to act that's different? And you'd be amazed at how differently people act. Like, and you're right, this is a can of worms. I famously had one of the most divisive community members in Final Fantasy VII community. Like,
I remember
this person is like a legend in terms of pariah status. And I'm not going to say their name, but I had this idea like, hey, how are they going to act in person? Like, if I give them the chance to like talk to these people that they've actually said these mean things to, and they actually have to look them in the face and do it, are they going to act different? They absolutely did act different. They absolutely did act different, and they were kind. There was forgiveness. There was charitability. The moment face-to-face contact was gone, and this person was disappointed again by the plot of the game. They resorted to the same behavior and actually escalated it. Became even worse. So it's a short-term solution, but my advice again to anybody that's like, before you hit enter, think of this as a person that is sitting right in front of you, and ask yourself, realistically, do you have the ability to act differently under that circumstance? If you don't, delete your account.
And what a great callback to what you said earlier. I mean, I'm currently, because of your words, rethinking every time I've seen the figures in the dark robes throughout Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and the way that Barrett and others stands up for them, because he associates Cloud with them now, and he sees Cloud in
that's beautiful.
Just an amazing way of thinking about this community and other people. It's like, I can think of them as just a faceless dark robe, or I can think of them as an identity, right?
That's so good, Wade. Oh, I got goosebumps thinking
from you, buddy. Like, I'm just floored and leveled by that. That is gonna take me a while to really process and integrate into my life. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Well, I think it's discussions that are worth having. It's easy to shy away from because it's easier. But you talk about Barrett and Cloud specific interactions, and I think one of the things that binds them together to me is that they journeyed together. They spent a lot of time together, so they had the rapport to be able to have that kind of relationship. And if we don't take the time to journey with people together or at all, then we don't have the ability to have that level of intensity in the relationship with one another. We don't need to hold each other accountable for things that people we don't know necessarily in the same way.
The amount of social problems that would be solved by exposure alone, just by being in other communities and understanding them, and vice versa. It's so concrete, the effects that traveling has on you. Like before the stream, you talked about how impactful it was for you to travel to Japan, how eye-opening that was. If you ever feel like you don't understand a person, or you have some sort of bias, or you're not sure whether a class of people, should exist, and they're not hurting anybody, I think the best way that you can gain empathy is exposure, and journeying together forces exposure, and so having a story that allows exposure as an element in empathy building and relationship building, it's very Final Fantasy, and it's again not a way that Final Fantasy VII reinvents storytelling, but it is really impactful regardless.
It's a great third-party space to have the discussion, though, in a way that isn't talking about any particular individual or circumstance. And yeah, maybe it alludes to it, but that's the nature and the possibility that exists within good storytelling. So I think it proves that they're telling a good and complex story, and that you could see yourself in it, and then it challenges you and gives you opportunities to open some doors that maybe weren't going to be present in other ways in your life. Well, my question that kind of wraps us up is this. How do you know so much about dog breeds? You named like every dog breed that was happening in the scene with Stan.
I believe it or not, I don't really know a lot about dog breeds. I do know a lot about cat breeds and cat species because my family was instrumental. It's another weird bit of Clarke lore. My family was instrumental in the creation of the Bengal, which is a domesticated cat breed that intermixed Asian leopard cats, which are a different species of cat, with domestic cats. And so I grew up and my family had full-blooded Asian leopard cats. We had ocelots, we had servals, we had all sorts of stuff. I guessed every dog breed wrong when I was playing the game before the Ultimania came out. The Ultimania came out and specified the dog breeds, and it turns out that I had none of them right. Like, I thought the weird dog that Johnny was holding was like a beagle, but without the helmet. Turns out that is a Shiba Inu,
and I know corgi.
Yeah, or a corgi. Yeah, I thought it was a corgi. I guess that's a Shiba Inu. And then, or I may be even wrong. Like, I may be even remembering wrong. I am not an authority. Like, let this be the most important lesson. I am not an authority on dog breeds. I will let you down if you come to me for that.
But from a family of cat creators.
Yeah.
Cat creators.
Yeah.
So Final Fantasy VII reunion is going to be all about cats, you will be ready for it. So
there is good cat lore
Betty
in Final Fantasy. Yeah, there is good cat lore in Final Fantasy VII. Like Hamaguchi, the director, his cat was a model for several of the cats.
Like in the line of cats when they're walking in chapter, like Bessie's chapter.
Started in remake, yeah. One of them was there, but that cat model is reused in the Nibelheim side quests.
Oh, amazing! Like with Fluffy. Okay, that's amazing.
Yeah. So there is that. Also, one of the biggest mysteries of Final Fantasy VII is Red 13, is Nanaki's species more feline or canine? Oh. And the answer is like yes. He's those things. He's got that more skeletal. Like, there's interviews saying he's got a feline skeletal structures, but then he howls at the moon, and he's called a lab rat dog, So it's like
lab rat dog.
Yeah.
The mysteries never end with Final Fantasy VII, and we could, of course, talk more and more, and we will definitely continue.
We didn't even get into religion.
We didn't. Right.
I'm an expert on Jewish mysticism, and we didn't talk about Sephiroth. Yeah, that's okay.
So obviously we have to do it again. But yeah, hey, again, thank you so much for being here with us today. This has just been an amazing conversation, and I cannot thank you enough for the time. Where can people find you?
I have a YouTube channel. I make a lot of preview content and theory discussions centered around the community. Mostly Final Fantasy VII, but I do broadly talk about other RPGs. Right now, the Mana series is something I'm focusing on. I've certainly
planting trees.
Yeah, planting trees. One Tree Planet is partnered with Square for Visions of Mana, which I think is
so cool.
The best messaging they've ever done. But I'm also on Twitch. I stream twitch.tv/SchrodingersBabySeal. And you can get me on X if you really want. I will warn you, some of my X stuff is a little bit political. And I try and toe the line a little bit on YouTube. Or if I'm not towing the line and I am doing political contact, I do mark it as such because I understand that not everybody wants to escape that way, and I support how hard the life can be. And if you want, a specific kind of content from me, I try and have stuff for a variety of people.
Well, we'll have all of that in the show notes. So if you're listening, you want to check out Clarke's stuff, look into the details just below. On a personal note, let me just say thank you. Thank you not only for being here, but thank you for your friendship. You invited me when I was out in LA to be a part of a content creator get together. And because of that, I have been connected not only with you, but with so many other people. And I do not say this lightly when I say this channel and it in many ways goes back to that one day. I am because you are. So thank you. Thank you
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure. My pleasure.
Well, thank you everybody for watching, and stay tuned because in the next week after this airs, we will be beginning our Final Fantasy VII Rebirth lecture series, and this episode kind of kicks us off on that. So thank you so much for that. With that, everybody, take it easy, and we will see you next time. Walk tall.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in. Thanks to SchrodingersBabySeal, aka Clarke, for the interview and all the kind words. We really appreciate it. Big thanks to Husky by the Geek for the intro song, and big thanks to Nick Smith for doing the graphics. We really appreciate it. You keep us looking good. And most of all, this programming is brought to you by viewers like you. Thanks so much for paying attention. Hope you have a great week and take care of yourself, and we'll see you next episode. Bye-bye.